So, at the World Economic Forum, this master plan for a post-war Gaza was unveiled. It paints a picture of this rebuilt, super-modern metropolis. But, behind all the glossy AI-generated images, there's a really controversial proposal that critics say would require the total erasure of Gaza as we know it.
This quote from former US President Donald Trump really sets the tone for everything we're about to discuss. You see, it frames the conversation around Gaza not just as a humanitarian crisis or a political conflict, but as a real estate opportunity. And that perspective is absolutely central to the plan we're going to break down.
Now, this vision was presented by real estate developer and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and it promises to rebuild Gaza from the ground up. But when you take a closer look at the proposal, which, by the way, was developed without any input from Palestinians, it reveals a story that's way more complex than just reconstruction.
Okay, so let's get into it. What exactly is this master plan proposing for the future of Gaza?
The plan puts forward this vision of a futuristic, business-focused hub. I mean, we're talking gleaming residential towers, advanced AI data centers, luxury seaside resorts, the whole shebang. And it's all being presented as this very entrepreneurial peace effort, something designed to attract investment and completely remake Gaza's image and its economy.
But here's the thing. What's the cost of a vision like this? To build this so-called new Gaza, it seems the plan requires wiping the slate completely clean, erasing the existing city, its neighborhoods, its history, and its landmarks.
To really wrap your head around the scale of this, analysts at Al Jazeera did something pretty clever. They took Kushner's color-coded map and laid it right on top of a map of Gaza from before the current war. And the results? Well, they reveal exactly what would have to disappear to make way for these new development zones.
Okay, let's start with the coastal tourism zone. This area, which is slated for resorts and luxury apartments, would be built directly over the Shati refugee camp, the Deir el-Balah camp, and most of the Ramel neighborhood. And that neighborhood is home to Gaza's biggest hospital, Al-Shifa, not to mention several major universities.
Then there's the industrial and data hub. This one is huge. It would replace the entire town of Beit Hanun, most of Beit Lahiya, an area that was famous for its strawberries, and, maybe most significantly, all of Gaza's old city. That means erasing places of incredible historical and religious importance, like the 1,000-year-old Great Omari Mosque and the St. Porphyrius Church.
And this just shows you the kind of trade-offs we're talking about. Even the areas that are designated for new parks and sports facilities would come at a massive cost. This green space would be built over most of the Jabalia and Maghazi refugee camps, along with historical sites like Barkuk Castle.
So when you put all this together, you start to see this huge disconnect, right? On one hand, you've got this glossy, investor-friendly vision, and on the other, the devastating reality for the people on the ground.
And we have to remember, this entire redevelopment proposal is happening against a backdrop of just immense human loss. By early 2024, the war had already killed tens of thousands of Palestinians, with thousands more just missing under all the rubble.
This slide really puts that contrast into sharp focus. The vision? It's all luxury condos and data centers. The reality? Over 80% of Gaza's buildings are damaged or just gone, leaving behind an estimated 68 million tons of rubble. The plan pitches a future investment opportunity, while the reality is mass displacement and people facing starvation.
Urbanism professor Ali Al-Rauf actually has a term for this approach, the Vegas-ification of Gaza. And his point is that the plan isn't about creating an organic city for the local population. Instead, it's about creating these exclusive, gated communities that are really only designed for a very specific, wealthy class of people.
And the criticisms really do stack up. First off, a huge one. Palestinians had no say in this plan. It makes zero mention of fundamental things like property rights or a path to statehood. Critics also argue it aligns perfectly with Israeli occupation needs and completely ignores the immediate question of housing for hundreds of thousands of displaced people, which could lead to financial displacement through gentrification. For a lot of analysts looking at this, the plan doesn't feel entirely new. They argue it echoes strategies and rhetoric that actually go back decades.
Critics are drawing a direct line through history here. They point to proposals from all the way back in 1967 by Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol to empty out Gaza, and they contrast that with the enduring spirit of resistance that the poet Mahmoud Darwish wrote about, all leading right up to Kushner's plan today. This quote right here, cited by analyst Samaya Ghanouchi, really makes that historical parallel explicit. She argues that the rhetoric of emptying out Gaza is just finding a new form in these modern redevelopment proposals, which would require mass displacement.
Ghannouchi and other critics have a name for this: capitalist colonialism. It's the idea of taking what they see as a colonial project, a land grab, and just rebranding it in the modern language of business, of investment and real estate development.
And this all brings us to the core of the debate, really. Is Gaza a homeland with a deep, complex history? Or is it, as these proposals seem to imply, just valuable real estate?
When you synthesize the key criticisms, a clear consensus emerges. It doesn't really matter if you're looking at Trump's broader comments or Kushner's detailed plan. Analysts argue the core problem is the same. These proposals prioritize a real estate vision over Palestinian identity, and that ultimately leads to displacement, whether it's physically removing people or financially pricing them out.
Ultimately, critics argue that these top-down plans are destined to fail for a pretty simple reason, and it's captured in this quote from Ghannouchi. They contend that any plan that just ignores the history, identity, and the will of the people who actually live there is just fundamentally flawed from the get-go.
And that leaves us with a final, crucial question. It really is the central tension of this entire debate. Is a city like Gaza a blank canvas, something you can just wipe clean and rebuild in a new image? Or is it something more? The sum of its people, its deep history, and its indelible identity?
We'll leave you with that question to consider. To keep breaking down the complex issues shaping our world, make sure to follow and subscribe for our next explainer. Thanks for joining us.